Alright guys, we're continuing the transformation of this Harley Davidson Sportster into the absolute dirt bike. And today's project is actually the one that I'm most excited about when it comes to this build. So let me quickly show you what we're going to install. Well, today we are tackling the front end conversion. So old one off, new one on. And this one is from a 2007 KTM SX250. And compared to most others, this one is actually very crisp. I am so hyped for this project because first of all, it's really gonna transform the look of the Sportster. Secondly, it just looks amazing. And then thirdly, I spent countless hours researching and comparing steering head bearing dimensions. So I'm a little bit nervous and excited to see if this one actually fits. The hole right here in the headlight is too small for the wires to go through with the plugs installed on them. Fortunately, I have the kit from JRready, which is the Deutsch pin connector kit, and it comes with a proper depinning tool. Not that you necessarily need it. You could also just make a little hook tool and then use a small screwdriver. But we want to get this wedge out and then just depin the plugs. And I'm actually very happy that Harley uses Deutsch pin connectors because they're super easy to work with, especially if you have the proper crimping pliers, because they can be quite expensive. But I would say JRready makes the best kind of like aftermarket kit where the pliers aren't ridiculously expensive. Don't get me wrong, they're still super expensive, but in my opinion, good tools are definitely worth the investment. And especially when it comes to wiring, because you don't want your bike to catch fire just because you went with cheap connectors and stuff like that. I've got all of the wires separated. These are all of the wires that go to the handlebars. These are all of the wires that connect to the main wiring harness. So the next step is to take off the control cables, throttle cable, clutch cable. Then we should be relatively good to take off the whole front end. I don't know what's going on. I mean, sometimes they like the Imperial system and then suddenly they use a 10mm wrench for these bolts. Why do you mix and match? This is just frustrating. I'm trying to wrap my head around the Imperial system and go through like 6 wrenches just to figure out that none of them fit until I try the good and trusted metric one. Take whatever system you prefer, but don't mix and match. Yo, that went surprisingly smooth, but taking things apart is always the easy step. Putting it back together and making it work can be a little bit more complicated. So I hope that my research on the KTM front end is correct and that it actually works seamlessly as you can now order the Dirtster merch. I got the samples in the mail and I absolutely love them. I've got t-shirts in black and white, caps in a few different colors and hoodies, and they will be only available until we finish the Dirtster project. So there's a little bit of kind of like an exclusive community for this build. Afterwards, once this bike is finished, there won't be any more Dirtster merch. So grab one if you want one, link is down below in the description. Now let's move on with the front end and install the KTM one. I'm so excited to see how this is actually gonna look and work out. That is amazing. That looks so good. I love that I got the black fork tubes. They just look very classy for a bike like this. But anyways, I just love them. And the steering head bearings also seem to fit very well. I just measured both of them, the original Harley one and this one, and they aren't completely exact. They're slightly off. The inner races though. The outer races that are on here are done anyway. So I'm gonna buy a complete set of KTM steering head bearings and then fit those, because the outer races, if my research is correct still, should be exactly the same like these ones, at least the outer diameter. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. But let's finish up this, because yo, I'm very excited. There are three things that we need to solve in order to make this work. First, I need to come up with some solution to the steering stop. At the moment, this goes all the way, and I need to research how far I should limit it. I need to get rid of this lock bracket down here because it's hitting the triple clamp at the bottom. And then the third thing is that probably the tank will be in the way of the top triple clamp. But actually, let me see. Just slightly. So what I need to figure out is how far I need to limit the steering basically, and if that is enough to not have to touch the tank. That would be amazing, because that would be such a huge advantage over the Honda triple clamps that on the one hand, I don't really like the looks of them, but also I've seen that people have to make dents in their tanks to make room for the top triple clamp. I already played around with a few ideas on the 3D printer, and my 3D design process is still a little bit messy, especially when I have multiple different reference points and moving parts. It's always a lot of trial and error. I try to get as many measurements as possible. Sometimes I use tape to get the outlines of parts and stuff like that, and then I copy that into Fusion 360, but it always takes a few tries to get this right. My third try is actually relatively good, I would say. This is obviously just a prototype, but it confirms my measurements and that everything works. I'm not sure if the steering radius is actually far enough, but for now I'm just gonna go with that. Use the 3D printed version, continue the build, have the front forks adjusted. They get lowered about 2 inches. Once I have all of that and the final geometry of the bike and the rear shocks also installed, then I can focus further on the steering stop. If you have any knowledge about this and you can give me some feedback on the whole steering stop situation, I would highly appreciate if you left that down below in the comments. For now, let's get the fairings and mock those up. And then I think we already have something that looks somewhat like a dirt bike. What we have here are KTM SX plastics. The fender and the headlight mask are for 2016 to 2019. I just like the look better than the 2007 ones. The fork guards are for 2007. I have to say, I don't really like the KTM plastics on the Dirtsters. It just is too long, but for now I'm gonna run them because I found very good deals on MotoSport.com, who later became another sponsor of this build. And for example, the headlight mask was $8. I got most of the KTM parts that I'm gonna use on this build from MotoSport.com. The headlight is from somewhere else. It's one of the cheapest LED ones that I could find. And this is just to get the bike up and running, test out the look. I went with white because I had a cheesy design idea and I I don't know, I don't really know how much I like it anymore. When I bought this bike, I saw 2 bald eagles driving up to Maryland, and I was oh, maybe I make this into a bald eagle design with white in the front and then all black. I already scratched that idea when I found a rear fender on motorsport.com for $9. So we're not gonna have a bald eagle design, but that's why I went with white. Let's see how we can get those installed, because I know that I need to fabricate an adapter for the mudguard. And some of you have asked how I design my 3D printed parts. And as I've said, my process is pretty messy, but on this one, I think I can show you a little bit. The main reference points that we need for this bottom plate are the threaded holes. They're 60 and 50 millimeters apart. So we can basically just draw a rectangle in Fusion 360 and add a circle with a hole dimension in each of the corners. If we then draw a border around that, that is our basic plate, but we also need to make sure that we leave room for this screw, which is sticking out in the back. And then we add a little bit of thickness to it, and that gives us our first plate. What I want to mainly use this plate for is to reference the new holes for the new fender. So I'm just gonna line this up in the center. Two things that I noticed that I want to change. The first one is that I can take away some material right here in the front to make it flow better with the triple clamp. And the second one is, at the moment the screw heads stick out, and that means that the fender is 3 millimeters lower than it has to be. So what I want to do is make this plate just a tiny bit thicker, but add cutouts for the 4 main screws so they sit inside the plate. And then I'm going to screw these screws right into the plastic plate. And I think that will be strong enough. If it breaks at some point, I'm just going to make this plate from metal. But for now, we're going to go with that. Here we have the updated bottom plate. I just had to add 1 millimeter of material to make everything work and make the screw heads disappear. Let's see if those holes also line up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Second one. That is the bottom bracket done. Now we just need to figure out a solution for these top mounting points. For that, what I'm going to do first is to also again mark where the holes line up now, like that. And then we know what we are working with. There's unfortunately not much room here for a thread because we have these 2 little raised parts. And I don't really want to make it sit too far forward to make room for a thread. Maybe we can use the steering stop. I'm gonna try to extend this part down so it sits inside of this groove right here, and then just add 2 studs that go through these mounting brackets of the fender. So I don't need screws, I don't need to add threads right here. And depending on how I'm gonna fabricate this in the end, this might be easier or harder to do, but I think it's always doable making that from metal. Before printing a bigger part like this, I often print one, if not multiple, kind of like layers of this print to check the dimensions. The first one for this one was this one, just to see if I got the curves right for this front part that I'm gonna add. And this one actually showed me that I had to do slight adjustments. So what I did, I just marked that at the top, and then I take measurements from that, transfer them into Fusion 360 and print it again. The next one was basically this one. It was the whole front bracket with the 2 studs, but without the steering stop part. So I wouldn't waste material and time on that. And these 2 each took like 20 to 30 minutes, so it's relatively quick. So this one confirmed that the curve in the front now fits the triple clamp, and it also confirmed that the studs were in the right location. And with that being confirmed, I could go ahead and print the whole steering stop slash front fender bracket, and I actually added a top plate to the steering stop part so it's a little bit sturdier and it doesn't put too much force on this like bottom part right here. And then we have the 2 studs right there. Hey, I'm very happy with how this turned out. This is all very well integrated into all of the forms that we already have existing on the bike. Next up, headlight. For the headlight, I went with this cheap LED headlight, but I think it actually looks nice and it has quite a few good reviews. I know a lot of people run these. In Germany, this would be completely illegal, but fortunately, we don't have to worry about that anymore, so I can run it. And that is the front end installed. I'm so happy with how easy this whole installation was. I'm actually very surprised that you can just take a front end off a KTM and put it onto a Harley Davidson. There are still a few things that I need to do in order to finish this project properly. New bearings, I need to get rid of this bracket right here. I need to at some point fabricate a proper steering stop, and I need to get the forks serviced, lowered and revalved. I'm actually gonna drop them off on Monday at the suspension company because on Wednesday I'm flying back home for 2 weeks, and then the guys have time to do all the work to them. And hopefully once I'm back, they're done and we can install them. What's also gonna be very exciting is the rear shocks that are currently being made for this specific bike. And they should also arrive somewhere in that time frame. So then we can have a look at the final stance, because at the moment I don't really like this look. I knew that when I bought these parts that I wouldn't really enjoy the look of them, but as I said, it wasn't super expensive and it's the fastest way to get it on the road without having to fabricate a lot of stuff. And the nice thing about being in the States now is that we can actually kind of like customize it further, do different iterations of this build. In Germany, that would be very, very hard to do, because how it basically works is you build a bike, you get it inspected, they put every part that is relevant for them in the title. And if you want to change something, you need to get it re-inspected. Here we can fortunately go ahead and just exchange the headlight. If we want to, we can exchange the fender, whatever. So I'm actually not too stressed out about the look at the moment. But yeah, that's all the stuff that's to come. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll also enjoy episode 1, which I'm going to link to right here. And grab some Dirtster merch while we're building this bike. As I said, link is down below in the description. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.